So far right now, Warframe has released around 51 Warframes. That's quite a big number, right? However, there's also a few other Warframes that actually released quite the early stage alongside with the main trio, and one of them being the Frosty Frost. Despite we know that Frost is one of the Warframes that released quite early on and also received the Prime version quite early too, but you don't really see people use Frost that much as the other frame is. Not to mention that it is a little bit hard to play. Yeah, I could tell because overall his ability is not so offensively and defensively. So is that really weak? I personally think not. Because of that, I decided to make a video to see that how do we make Frost strong again. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. Based on the whole Frost kit, you could tell that he is quite more focused on the cold damage. But cold is actually not good as the offensive element, mainly because cold usually strong against shield, where magnetic and toxic already bypass it very well. But usually cold will be more effectively for the proc status as it can slow down the enemies. But if that's the case, then if you can kill the enemies so fast enough, then why bother for slowing enemies down? But that's actually not the case, because for Frost itself, he can try to use the cold to freeze the enemies. That's what makes Frost can be effectively useful. Still, like I mentioned before, freezing the enemies is usually not the top priority, as when you can kill the enemy fast enough, you don't really need to slow the enemies down. But why must Frost really need to use the freezing part? That's because of the Augment that released a few months ago, Biting Frost. With Biting Frost here, each of the freezing enemies can actually deal extra 200% of crit chance and crit damage. This also shows that if you can use Frost to keep freezing the enemy, you can make sure that you can deal a massive amount of damage against frozen enemies. Of course, not all the enemies can be frozen up immediately. Certain enemies such as Overguard enemies, for example Eximus and Thrax units, or Acolytes itself, they are the enemies that are not able to frozen up. This also shows that you cannot use Biting Frost on them quite effectively, but that's not the issues here. You see, in order to frozen up the enemy, you have few options here, either using Freeze, Snow Glow, and Avalanche. And by far right now, Avalanche is the best ability to freeze up the enemies. And what does Avalanche have for extra? Armor Strip. If you've mod up enough strength, those Avalanche can not just only freeze the enemy, but also armor strip those enemies. In other words, if you face up those enemies such as Eximus, Thrax, or even Acolytes, despite you cannot freeze them, still, armor stripping them will allow you to still doing massive damage against them. So it's not really an issue even though you cannot use Biting Frost on them. Now, for our build here, we know that we have to make sure that Avalanche can reach full armor strip. This also means that we have to push the strength to around 167%. This also means that in order to reach that value, Overextended, Umbra Intensify, August Secret, as well as more Augmented will allow us to push up around that value. This should be enough because we don't really need to focus on the damage itself. Instead, we just try to reach up the value only the purpose of armor strip for Avalanche. Because we try to use the Biting Frost Augment to deal massive damage, so this is obvious. Bravery Spike, Rolling Guard, as well as Prime Surefooted, quite self-explanatory. And because we try to go with the shield gating style, this also means that Decaying Dragon Key is also a must, as the health and the armor value is not enough for Frost to be health tanky. I'm using just only one prime continuity here because there's not much of the abilities require durations, so I don't think there's any issues here. Now, you can see that I'm using Natural Talent mainly because we will be recasting Avalanche a lot of time, and you can tell that Avalanche casting animation is a little bit too slow at some point, so Natural Talent is really needed in order for us to make sure that Avalanche can cast much faster. And for the energy part, I'm using Archon Flow. Actually, the normal version of Prime Flow is enough. I'm using this because I got this, and who knows that maybe if you're lucky enough with the other abilities to killing them, then you can proc it up with the extra energy orb. Who knows? But if you don't have this, you can just use Prime Flow. If you want, Archon Flow is the end. Now, here is the problem. This build is actually quite energy hungry. What does that mean? Even with the Archon flows here, you can only reach up to the maximum of 425 energy. This also shows that if you recast the Avalanche lots of time, then you can run out energy quite as quickly as possible. So in order to cover that problem, not only I'm using the Nourish Helmet ability to improve the energy orb effectiveness, but I'm also using Arcane Energize as well as Emergence dissipate in order for us to get the maximum amount of energy, because you have no idea that you can run energy at one point and you will need that to try to freeze the enemy. Not to mention that you also need to rely on the Avalanche to shield gating. This is why you really need a lot of energy for this build. And there you have it. For the final video before 2022 end, I decided to release a video that quite related to Christmas, which is the Icy Snow version. That's why I picked Frost. And luckily enough, I haven't really used Frost for a long time, so I think this is a good chance for me to show you that Frost is actually a good frame to play with. Don't try to judge a book by its cover. Same goes by Frost. Don't because everything that he had is actually a little bit weak, so you think that it is weak. It is not. It's just based on how we can try to make it good again. And for this time around, I think I'm quite satisfied with this kind of build. Though you still need to be careful that you may somehow kill yourself at some point. I did for myself a lot of time. Still, that's how make games interesting, right? If you become immortal, then how come you can feel the passion of the dead behind you? So I think this is quite good. If this is your first time watching, why not leave a like and subscribe to my channel so that you won't miss out any newest contents from me. Why not leave your comments down below if you got any ideas or thoughts you want to share with all of us. And that's it from me, and as always, I will see you all next time. Bye bye!